This is the Green Corn Rebellion Show. I'm Gregory Hardin II, and today I'm here with my friend, State Representative Collin Walke, who is currently representing House District 87, which is in Northwest Oklahoma City. He is decided not to run for re-election this year after spending 3 terms in the legislature, right? Elected in 2016. So yeah, how are you doing today?
I like to remind people I ran in 2014 as well and lost, just because that's 8 years of campaigning. That's the only reason I like to mention that. So
Yeah, how are you doing this morning?
Doing good. How are you doing today, Gregory?
I'm doing all right. Hopefully getting ready for 8 or so years of campaigning myself. So
there you go.
Whoa. Stop what you're doing. Okay. If you like this video and you like the other content on my channel, please hit the like button on this video. Also, go hit subscribe like right now. And also, when you hit subscribe, click the bell so you can get notifications whenever I put out a new video. So, thanks. All right. Enjoy the rest of the video.
So tell me about session this year and why there were so many different special sessions, because you guys were technically in session into June, right? This year?
We're still technically in session. So
oh God, really?
Yeah. But for a good reason.
Yeah.
So the first special session that we were in, so we had our legislative session that started in February, ended in May, towards the end of May. It was one of the later sessions. I think we actually ended on the deadline, which is the last Friday in May. I think that's what happened. And in that time period, so then thereafter, Governor Stitt called us into a special session to address tax breaks. And that's what you were talking about with regard to June. So we went back in June for 3 or 4 days and passed, I don't even remember now, some sort of tax breaks. I don't remember exactly what it contained because we knew it wasn't going anywhere. We knew the Senate wasn't going to hear anything, et cetera. But because Governor Stitt wanted to proclaim some sort of tax relief benefits, he called that special session. Nothing came out of it. However, before the end of session, we went into special session in order to distribute ARPA funds. So the American Rescue Plan Act, or American Recovery Plan Act, forget which one, Rescue and Recovery. Is
yeah.
Okay, yeah. We had been given $1.8 billion worth of federal funding, and we were one of like 10 states that to date hadn't distributed any of those funds, right? The entire point of this is to help with an economic recovery. And certainly you can make an argument, I guess, if you're on the other side that there's too much money in the market, but let's set that aside for now. The reality is that's what this money is intended for. Why are we sitting on top of it when we can invest it into our communities? And so the legislature appropriately, correctly usurped that power from Stitt. He was the one that was going to be able to make all those decisions. And I'll remind you that Stitt had declared every single application for ARPA funding confidential and not subject to the Open Records Act. So at the end of the day, when projects ended up getting awarded, you wouldn't have known whether or not it was because he doesn't like you, because your project was bad, or whether there were good projects out there that somebody else got because he believes, you scratch my back, I scratch yours. So the legislature took back the power and said, we're going to be the ones that distribute the funds. I do believe that Stitt has a final veto on it, but we can override the vetoes if we want. And so we've already gone in once during that last special session and distributed some funds. And so we'll go back in probably once a month. I would anticipate between now and November to distribute funds. So the ARPA funding committee will decide these projects need to be let. We'll come in, vote and approve them and be done. So that's the special session that we're still in and we'll probably be in until November.
Okay. Oh God, until November?
Yeah, but we're only going to go in once a month. Yeah. So
okay.
and for a day at a time, because all of the work's been done. This isn't like a true special session. Like there's not going to be a lot of fights over this stuff.
Okay, that makes sense, because I was about to say, like, there's no way you guys could just be in every day or every other day until November. That'd be insane.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. So, so tell me about the regular session and what all happened during that this year.
Well, there was a lot of things that happened. I mean, I think the majority of bills that we ran, and I want to be clear about this, aside from the typical functioning government bills, which passed 90% bipartisan, no issues, tax commission makes X request, no problem, right? I'd say the vast majority of the bills that aren't towards the proper functioning of government dealt with social issues. And obviously abortion was at the top of that list. And we're seeing the negative outcomes of that, especially in relation to the Supreme Court Dobbs decision. So we saw that type of legislation. But importantly, I think one of the, especially now, pieces of legislation that we passed was the LEAD Act, which had to do with Project Ocean, which was the big secret. We're going to take $750 million, hold it back and give it as a tax incentive to Panasonic to try and get Panasonic to come here. And what's important about that is twofold. So I guess 3 points. The first one is as far as tax incentives go, the way we structured this one was the best way to do it. Because historically what we've done is we've said, here's some tax credits, go use them, don't use them, we don't care. But the problem is when you have an economic downturn and you've guaranteed tax credits, then they can continue to use those tax credits even after the economic downturn. What we did with this funding was we said, this is what we have. We set it aside and we said, if you use it, great. If you don't, great. And if you don't, we get to reinvest it, okay? So it was actually done and structured in a good way. However, this was it was called Project Ocean because all of the higher ups had signed non-disclosure agreements, so they wouldn't be able to talk about who was coming and those sorts of things. And to me, that flies in the face of open and transparent government. And that's part of the reason why I voted against this. I trust Stitt as far as I can throw him. And so consequently, why would I believe a damn word that comes out of his mouth? Until you show me and tell me who we're talking about, I'm not going to give you any money. And so that was horrible and pathetic. The fact that we had so many legislators who voted for this piece of legislation on the hope and a prayer that we were being told the truth. And I'm sorry, but if you trust Stitt's administration to tell you the truth, if you trust McCall, if you trust Treat to tell you the truth, well, you got some problems. And so the fact that Project Ocean was covered by non-disclosure agreements and they wanted us to give away $750 million really stuck in my craw. The third thing I'll say, though, is now that we know that they chose Kansas over Oklahoma, the question is, what are we going to do with that $750 million? And basically, the Republicans want to do one of two things. The first one is they just want to leave it there in case somebody else comes along, which I think is a horrible idea. Option two is to leave it there to some degree to allow for investments throughout the state for infrastructure. So, for example, if you've noticed what's happened at Mid-America Industrial Park, which is where Panasonic was supposed to come, the reason why they were able to come to Mid-America is because they've already got the infrastructure in place. Places like Burns Flat, Oklahoma, Southwest Oklahoma, Northwest, Southeast, they don't have the infrastructure in place to where it's shovel ready. So if a company wants to come, they can just plug into utilities and move on. And so I don't think that it's a bad idea necessarily to invest those dollars in infrastructure throughout the state. I think that's a good idea. But there's a third option, and we don't have to use all $750 million for any of these. The third one is to actually invest in other things like core governmental services for mental health, getting the district attorneys off of their fines and fee structure, getting the entire court system back to general revenue. That's the way it was up until the early 80s. That's what we need to get back to. And we have more than enough money to do it with that $750 million setting aside. So that was the big economic issue that we dealt with this session. And then obviously the other ones that we talked about. So those are kind of just highlights of what happened this session.
Episodes of the Green Corn Rebellion Show are sponsored by Oklahoma Progress Now. Oklahoma Progress Now is a 501c4 organization focused on building progressive power in Oklahoma. Their primary efforts are on developing progressive content for a 21st century audience, coalition, and capacity building across progressive organizations and causes, and working to see elected leaders who are more responsive to their constituents and the needs of the many. Areas of focus include progressive messaging and communications, coalition building and resource sharing, and focused progressive policy goals. You can check out their Twitch live streams, and they go live on Facebook at noon, Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Please support this organization. It's a really great organization. It's just getting started here in Oklahoma. Thank you. Now enjoy the rest of the video.
Okay. So another thing that I've been trying to read into is the managed care bill that was voted on and passed. So do you have any information about what that is and how that works and how it will affect people who are on Sooner Care?
Yeah, so as you all know, last session, Governor Stitt made a huge push to privatize Medicaid expansion. So right now, the way it works is, or before Medicaid expansion, the way it worked is that the Oklahoma Health Care Authority was the one that oversaw who was entitled to Medicaid benefits, who got them, et cetera. Okay. They were managing Medicaid. So then after Stitt wanted to privatize the management of it, there was some legal issues, and ultimately that wasn't possible. But what happened is OHCA, the Healthcare Authority, continued to oversee the Medicaid expansion, proving that we don't need to have a private entity oversee and manage this. However, Stitt wasn't going to leave that alone. He wanted some form of privatized managed care. What had previously been pitched and that ultimately didn't happen was kind of a top-down structure. So you would have an insurance company basically come in, and they're the ones that are going to manage and say, these are the doctors we contract with. These are the hospital facilities we contract with. These are the people who do X, Y, and Z. And so providers, healthcare providers, just have to go, okay, I'll do it. What ended up happening, and the reason why I voted for this form of a privatized managed care system, because what ended up happening is instead of the insurance companies being at the top managing everything, they became partners with all of the other providers, with the healthcare providers, the mental health care providers, et cetera. So instead of being top down, now it's a partnership. And I can live with that decision because at least now the healthcare providers are on the same footing as the actual managed care entities. So I think that this will be a decent blend. I mean, I guess, in the world of sausage making, if you've got to do privatized managed care because the Republicans are going to go there one way or the other, this is the best setup and structure for it. So in theory, what you should see is improved outcomes for individuals who are part of that Medicaid expansion population. And I'll just remind you, too, that the Medicaid expansion population that we have are actually the healthiest out of the group. So in other words, traditionally, there's basically two types of managed care. And for those individuals with severe needs and disabilities, they're already still covered under OHCA. So this privatized entity is only going to cover, I think, my understanding is they're only going to cover the new additions to Medicaid expansion. So those individuals who newly qualified would be under this privatized care.
Okay. Because I was reading into this to see what it was and went down this rabbit hole a couple of days ago. I was just like reading for hours and hours, just saying, what is this? What does this mean? What are these different types of managed care and what do we have currently and blah, blah, blah. So the bill that was passed, it only applies to the people who were added under the expansion.
I believe that's the case. Yeah.
And then the people who were under, because it was an income thing, they extended the income level in which you can get it. So therefore, the people who were able to get it before expansion, they're still on the same management system that it was before. Okay, that makes sense.
I believe that's the case. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Let's see. So what so last couple of times you came on, you talked about your data privacy bill. What happened to that this session? Did anything happen to it?
Yeah, so we started off extremely optimistic. So we had met with, so two things. One, remember a year ago, I ran HB 1602. It passed out of House 85-11, went to the Senate, and Senator Julie Daniels killed it. Okay, but it's still alive because we run two-term sessions. And so it was still alive for this session, and Treat had placed Julie Daniels with Senator Brent Howard for the chair of the judiciary. And so Representative West and myself met with Senator Howard in order to discuss, hey, you didn't give this bill a hearing. What do you need to have happen to it? Those sorts of things. And while he never firmly committed to hearing it, all signs were he was going to give it a hearing. Whether it would pass at a committee, who knows? Well, as insurance, we ran a second bill that passed out of that House 75-15, had a little bit of differences from HB 1602, made it a stronger bill, to be quite frank. Well, in the midst of all that, if you can recall, Senator Treat had decided to run a school voucher bill, and Senator Howard voted against it. And as all things politics, if you don't do what the leader wants, you get punished. And so Senator Treat replaced Senator Howard with Senator Daniels and put her back onto the judiciary chair. The consequence of that was my bills were dead. So we thought that it was a good shot at getting it heard, but that's what ended up happening. I anticipate that Representative West will still carry that legislation next session. I think he's going to keep banging on that door. I just think that data privacy world is getting really interesting right now. Whether or not the states are going to do something or whether or not the federal government's going to do something and preempt it. There have been several big bills, exciting bills, bipartisan bills at the federal level that get the privacy community all excited and then they just die. And so I don't know what's going to happen at the end of the day with any of this. I really wish that Oklahoma and every other state could get something on the books. Even if it's not opt-in. I mean, good God, give us the right to at least know what the hell these tech companies have on us. That's a right you don't personally have right now, unless you live in California, Virginia, ultimately Colorado, Utah, and Connecticut, I believe, are the only 5 states that actually have true data privacy laws in place. So that's the situation for my bills, but I anticipate that they'll keep going and fighting the good fight.
All right. That's disappointing, but that's something though.
It's just like, it really all comes down to this. It comes down to this on two ways. One, compliance costs, which my argument is that compliance costs under our regime are actually fairly minimal. But the other aspect of it too is the pocketbook hit that a lot of these tech companies are going to take. So for example, when Apple on their iPhone went to opt in and you had to say, don't track every time you downloaded an app or go ahead and track or whatever, Facebook estimates that cost them $10 billion last year. $10 billion. So that shows you just how impactful data privacy is on the financial side. Of course, I have zero empathy for them using our data and bitching about the fact that they no longer have access to $10 billion worth of our data, because that's just like me stealing your car and then being upset that I sold it for less than it was worth. It wasn't mine in the first place to sell. Yeah. Right. So I have zero empathy for that argument. The compliance argument I have some sympathy for, but on the flip side of the coin is just like healthcare providers. If you want to provide a service to me, you owe me certain obligations that you're not going to do things with my data. If I'm going to do business with you, you have certain obligations and responsibilities by virtue of what it is that you do. If I go to my healthcare doctor, by virtue of that, they're covered by HIPAA. They're not releasing my information. Same thing if I'm using Facebook, you shouldn't be releasing my information unless I give you permission to do it. So one of them I have sympathy for, the other one I don't.
Yeah. And whenever I get in the legislature, hopefully I will be able to vote for that bill if it comes up again. Let's see. So, what were some of your favorite moments while being in office, and what were some of your least favorite, and what are some of your personal accomplishments while being in office? I'm sure there's some overlap with those things. Hopefully not with
Yeah.
the least favorite and the personal accomplishments part, but still.
You know, honestly, the teacher walkout was one of the most impactful experiences of my life for a whole slew of reasons. Not the least of which, though, I remember distinctly one day during that, towards the end, a group of women, teachers walking out, and one of them was just crying. She was carrying her sign, she was crying. And I went up and I just said, "Hi, I'm Collin Walke. Thank you so much for being here." And she just gave me a big hug. And she just said, "All I want to do is talk to my representative, and he won't talk to me." And it was the representative from Logan County at the time. It wasn't Gary Mize. I forget his name off the top of my head, but it was that representative. And, you know, I was so disappointed, A, in that representative, but B, that we had constituents who came to the Capitol and were so distraught at their situation. So that was a moment of impact for me. Another moment of impact for me was, I believe it was 1805, HB 1805 or 1802, which was a bill that dealt with using state dollars for private adoption subsidies, specifically geared towards Catholic charities, which wanted to discriminate against LGBTQ individuals in adoptions. And I had a fundamental problem with this for a whole slew of reasons. So did our caucus. And even though we had that bill killed 37 different times, Speaker McCall created a committee out of whole cloth, like on a specific day. They ran the bill through the committee and brought it back up on the floor, and ultimately it passed. But before it passed, Representative Corey Williams and others had stood up, and we had gotten in a huge fight. They were threatening to call the highway patrol to arrest Corey, and all of us standing in the way. It got really intense.
I don't remember
and I was
this.
extremely proud. Yeah, it was really intense. And that was a moment, though, that I was extremely proud for the way we stood up and fought for what we believed in. So those are kind of some impactful moments. You know, my biggest accomplishment, honestly, I would say, even though it's not become law, is the data privacy, because I think I've started a conversation, myself and Representative West have started a conversation that no one was talking about. No one considered Oklahoma a player in this field. And yet here we are, we made national headlines, and now there's actually that conversation happening in this state. So that's what I'm most proud of. You know, I ushered through Ida's law, but I got to give credit to Mickey Dolenz on that one. You know, he really started that path, and, you know, just because I carried it across the finish line, I think the credit goes to him on that all day long. Ultimately, I passed 5 laws in 6 years, which for a Democrat is actually pretty good. I think if you look at most of the other bills or other reps, that they don't have as many, you know, but most of them were fairly narrow changes. I thought they were meaningful changes. But I would certainly say data privacy is probably my crown jewel.
All right. No, I had no idea about that bill, and they almost called the highway patrol.
Oh yeah. Yeah, what happened was
that's a long time ago too, because you said Corey Williams. That had to be 2017, 2018.
2018. It was 2018. Yeah. Representative Todd Russ was sitting in the speaker's chair. He told Corey Williams to sit down. Corey said, "Screw you." I mean, we all circled around Corey. We're like, if you're going to come get him, you got to get through us. It was meaningful.
Oh wow, that's something. There's video of that, right?
Oh yeah. You know what? Now that you mentioned that, I almost wonder if they cut the video on it. I don't know. I bet you we could go back and find that out. We could go find that out.
Yeah, because that's something. A state legislator from like the late 80s and 90s, he told me about some fight that happened on the state house floor in like 89 or something, where one of the state reps was handing out Cuban cigars and had like this much ash on their cigar and walked up to one of the state reps who hated smoking and like dipped it on his tie. And then they like got into a fight, and it was hilarious. And the funnier part about that story to me isn't even that happened, because there's so many things in that story that I'm just like, wait, Cuban cigars in the late 80s on the house floor, fighting, clip-on tie. I was like, what? And then what was it? But no, the guy who, I think what he told me was the guy who had a problem with smoking and that had the ash on his tie, dipped on his tie, he lost re-election that next year. Like, I'm like, wow, that guy had a fun time in politics. Yeah. But I'm sure, as we all know, he had the last laugh, because now it is illegal to smoke pretty much everywhere indoors. So he's the one that came out victorious in the end, I'm sure. I gotta find out who that person is, because this is too funny of a story. But no, what was I gonna ask? But no, so I was thinking about this the other day when it comes, so because we have term limits in the state legislature, you can only serve 12 years total, or be elected to 12 years total. So when it comes to Democrats and seniority, you were elected in 2016. You're technically one of the more senior members, because in the House, at least, because Emily Virgin is the only one that's terming out this year in the House. And then I don't think there was anyone that was elected in 2012. And then 2014, I think it's one person.
I think it's Regina Goodwin, maybe.
Yeah.
I could be wrong, but I think Regina. But yeah, everybody else is either in my class, like Forrest Bennett, Monroe Nichols, or lower. Cindy, I guess technically is the most senior.
Yeah, because she was in 2015. She came in
2015. Yeah. But our caucus is so small that seniority, I don't know how much it matters. So think about this. Andy Fugate got elected in 18, I think.
Yeah.
And then in 20 became our floor leader. Right?
Yeah.
That's unheard of. Like, that doesn't happen. But there were reasons why that happened. But again, part of it has to do with just the size of our caucus. And I think that you have to plug players in, irrespective of their seniority, if they've got the skills to carry something through. Yeah.
Yeah, because the reason why I was thinking about that is because I haven't even been voting for 12 years yet. Most of the Democratic caucus has been in office for as long as I've been able to vote. And I'm like, that doesn't feel right at all to me. But I guess since, the term limits and just how things worked out that way, because then in the state Senate, it's even smaller. So you're talking about, 8 Democrats, I think,
in the Senate. Yeah.
And I think some of them, they would have been more senior in the House, because I think, Kay Floyd was elected in 2012 to the state House, I think. And so was Young, I think. Either 2012 or 2014 for both of them. They were elected to the House, and then they got elected to the Senate or something like that. But I think they would have been two of the more senior members if they were still in the House, but because they're in the Senate now, they're not. But I think
absolutely, yeah.
But I think also because of that, they are also the most senior members of the Senate as well, because all the senators have been elected. Democratic senators have been elected to the Senate within the last 6 years or so. Because I think with that, Kay Floyd is the senior one, and then all the other ones got elected in 2018 and then 2020.
Yep.
Which to me is more scarier, because a lot of them are up for re-election this year, and so it's like, oh, they could all lose, and then we have like half the Senate caucus that we had just last year. And but yeah,
Fortunately, I mean, I don't know how their districts turned out after redistricting, like the House. But I mean, I'll tell you, in the House, whether you're a Republican or Democrat, your seat got safer, which is a problem. I don't like that, but it did. And I think it's probably the same for the Senate. And I don't know. I mean, I think as far as the people that are up for re-election this year in the Senate, because they do it every 2 years, depending on, because they're elected for 4 years, but they go every two, depending on when they're elected. I think that JJ Dawson's probably the toughest race.
Okay.
Other than that, I think that they're all going to do fine. And I think that JJ will do fine too, but his is probably the toughest race.
Yeah. So I think there's 2 more questions. So tell me why you are not running for re-election this year.
So there are 2 primary reasons for it. The first one is that I think that I can actually be more effective outside the building than inside. Now that I know how the sausage is really made, I think that until you've actually lived inside that building and really gotten to see the process and how the sausage is made internally, externally, you don't get it. I didn't get it. I mean, you think you have this idea, but until you're in there, and part of the reason why I can say that is because my Republican friends are just as surprised as I am about how this stuff really works. So I don't think you have to have a title by your name to be impactful. And so during those deadline weeks, we're out there for 3 weeks at a time, 12 hours a day, and we're running bills that the outcome of the bills before they happen. I feel like if I invested that time externally to try and make a change internally, it would actually be a better use of my time personally. And that brings up the second reason why, which is I think that politics is heading in a direction that no longer fits with who I am as a person. I feel like now in today's political world, you have to be talking about every single topic every single day. And if you don't, your constituents are like, well, what are you doing? Why do we even have you here? It's like the whole picture or it didn't happen. And I think that's detrimental for 2 reasons. The first reason it's detrimental is because then the people that you're electing are the people who enjoy being on social media every day and enjoy being part of the shenanigans as opposed to the constructive policy work, because they're too focused on getting the attention that they need, want, etc. The other reason why I think it's detrimental is because on the constituent side, you are essentially saying, I do not trust the person that I elected unless I can see them every single day doing something. So for example, I got contacted by somebody during session saying, I don't see you debating abortion bills anymore. Are you supportive of pro-life measures? And my response is I have debated these bills every single year they've come up. My voice is no longer necessary. I still vote against them. Go look at my voting record. I vote against them all day. Just because I'm not saying anything and I'm letting other people speak on this subject doesn't mean I don't care. It means that maybe they have something better and more constructive and creative to say at the moment than I do. And so it's this distrust of the people that we should be trusting almost implicitly. And I get that I get it, especially from the perspective of maybe I'm a Democrat like you, in a Republican seat, and I don't trust that representative. And I get that tension. But when it's your own team that is, slogging you, and it's like, me. I mean, how many times do I have to say X before you think that I believe X, right? How many times do I have to do X before you know I'm going to do X? So I think this distrust is really problematic because it's breeding people into politics who want the attention, who want the social media, but don't really care about the policy. And so I think that those voices are important. For example, Forrest Bennett, I think he does a great job of doing those sorts of things, using his bully pulpit. That's just not my personality. I'm more of a policy guy. I'd rather get in and really work the angles and think about this thoughtfully than just simply be on social media all day. Plus, my position with data privacy, I hate social media anyway because of that. So
yeah, that makes sense. Is understandable. So thank you for coming on. And thank you for all the times you have come on over the last couple of years to talk about what's going on at the Capitol. What will you be doing now that you will be out of the legislature in the coming year or so?
Well, I never predict too far down the road. And I haven't foreclosed the possibility of ever running for office again or anything like that. But it's certainly the time is not right now. But it looks like I'm going to be back into practicing law, predominantly in data privacy. I'm going to try and build up a data privacy practice. But I'm going to go back into business litigation, business transactions, and build up that data privacy practice. And then I'll still be involved in advocacy. I'll still be involved in politics. I just won't be up there at the Capitol necessarily doing it. And so I'm not going to be too far afield. I'm sure we'll still be running into each other, and hopefully I'll be running into you up at the Capitol.
Hopefully, and hopefully you'll be donating to people as well. Not just me, but other people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for having me on, Gregory. And as always, hope to stay in touch, buddy.
Yeah.